In this lesson, we're going to look at how to find the equation of a trig function given the graph. So we want to find an equation in both sine and cosine for the following graph. So the first thing that we can determine is the middle. So remember that the middle is the sinusoidal axis. And we can find that by taking the top, adding it to the bottom, and dividing by 2. So in this graph, the top here is at 5, the bottom is at -3, and we're going to average that out to find the middle. So 5 minus 3 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I'm just going to draw that in here, because that will help us find other transformations. So the middle is at 1, and that is my vertical shift. So that's my b value. So remember, we're trying to find a function and all the transformations that occur. So we just found b. So b is 1, it's shifted up 1. The second thing we can now find is the amplitude. So the amplitude you could definitely read off the graph. Now that you've drawn in the middle, we could definitely count to find the amplitude. So starting at 1, it goes up to 5, which is 4. Starting at 1, it goes down to -3, which is also 4. So the amplitude is 4. If you want a formula for amplitude, it is the maximum minus the minimum. So it's a difference between the top and the bottom divided by 2. So it would be 5 minus -3 divided by 2, which is 8/2, which is 4. So either way, whether you do a calculation or whether you just count, that is fine. So that is our a value. So right now we know a is 4 and we know b is 1. Now we're going to find the c value. So c is what stretches and compresses the period. So the normal period is usually 360, and we're going to find the period of this graph and compare the two. So the period we can determine from any 2 points. I could start here and end here. It's probably the easiest. So starting at 0, it completes one cycle at 180 degrees. So the period is 180, which means the c value is 2. So now I can start writing out my equations. I want one for sine and one for cosine. The amplitude is 4. That will be the same for both. One is sine, one is cosine. The c value is 2. That will be the same for both. And the b value is 1. That will be the same for both. What I need to now determine is the phase shift. So if you think about a sine curve, sine always starts at 0, 0. So I'm going to compare that to this graph. So we always measure from the middle axes. So here is the start of a cycle. Right, here's one cycle for sine. So that normally starts at the middle at 0. It's been shifted to the right. So the start has been shifted to the right 45 degrees. So if I'm writing a sine curve, my x value is shifted to the right 45. If I were doing cosine, remember that cosine starts at the top. So normally cosine starts here, now it's over here. So the top has been shifted to the right 90 degrees. So this would be x minus 90. Now remember, there's more than one answer because it's periodic. I could go left and I wouldn't be wrong. So I could say it's also shifted left 90. So I could also put x plus 90. I could also go all the way over to here, but generally we like to go to the closest one in the positive direction. So although these are all other possible answers, generally we go to the right and we go in the positive direction. The third option is to do a reflection. So I could say that cosine has flipped to the bottom with no shift. So we could say I took the cosine curve and flipped it over but and did not shift it to the right. So the top is now the bottom. So that is a third option. Some people like to do that, so I would say it's -4. So I flipped it over. I don't have any shift now. So the vertical reflection negates the shift to the right, and that's another option. So those are all three valid options for that graph. Okay, so let's do this example here. We'll do it in terms of sine and cosine. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the middle. So we're going to take the top plus the bottom and divide by 2. So the top is at 4, the bottom is at -4, divided by 2 is 0. So the middle is the x-axis. So there's no vertical shift. I can find the amplitude. I can just count. So it's 4 to the top, 4 to the bottom. So the amplitude's 4. I can find, so right now I know B is 0, A is 4. Then I'm going to find C. Normal period's 360. I'm going to divide it by the period of this graph. So the period of this graph is the regular 360. So C is just 1. And then I can start my equations. So amplitude is 4. I'll do sine and cosine. C is just 1, so it's just 1x. There is no vertical shift, so +0, we don't need that. The sine is exactly where it should be, starting at 0, 0. So there's no phase shift for sine. Cosine is normally starts at the top here, now it's over here. So the cosine curve has been shifted to the right 90 degrees. Okay, let's do one more example here. So the middle is the max plus the min divided by 2. The maximum is 2. The minimum is -3. So here's the bottom at -3, here's the top at 2. So that is -1 over 2, -1/2. So I'm just going to draw that in here. So here's my middle, approximately here. That's important when I do the amplitude and the phase shift. So B is -1/2. The amplitude is the top minus the bottom divided by 2. So we'll take 2 minus -3 divided by 2, which is 5 over 2, or 2.5. So A is 5 over 2. B is -1/2. Then we'll find C. C is 360 divided by the period. So the period of this graph, let's go top to top. So it looks like it is 600 is the period. I might just reduce that. So reduce by 10 and then reduce by 6. Actually, I can reduce by 12. So that would reduce to 3 over 5. So C is 3 over 5. I can start to write my equations. So amplitude is 5 over 2. We'll do 1 for sine, 1 for cosine. C is 3 over 5. And B is -1/2. So the amplitude, the C, and the vertical shift are all the same. So then we're going to look at sine. Is there a shift in sine? So sine, I could either go left or I could go all the way over here to the right. So remember, sine is always measured from this middle axis. So it would be right here. Should erase that there. So it's always measured from the middle axis. Okay, so it's either here or all the way over here. Well, since I can't really see that, I'm going to go to the right. So let's just erase here so I can see this, because it's a little bit messy here. So it's over here to the right. So think about it as being symmetrical. So the period is 600. So half of 600 is 350, so 450, but it's shifted. Each of these increments are 75, so it would be 350, 300 plus 75, so 375. So we'll say sine has shifted right, 375. Cosine starts where it is. So cosine, we don't need a vertical shift. So let's just erase this. So cosine starts at the top. That's where this graph starts. So we don't need a shift for cosine.